Hello there. Today we're going to learn about relationships and ecosystems. Now, in your online book or your paper book, you should be into Unit 2, and this would be Lesson 1. So, Unit 2, Lesson 1 is where we're at, and I'm just going to go through the readings today, and hopefully this recording works out. So, here we're going to start off with basically, you should get to this page in your online version, and you should see this coyote. Now, coyotes basically are in every state in the United States. They are very adaptable, awesome, amazing animals. So this coyote roams the Sonoran Desert near Tucson. My brother happens to live in Tucson, so I've been to the Sonora Desert and the Sonora Desert Museum. It's a really unique ecosystem. It's in Arizona. It's really darn hot there. My brother has to wear oven mitts in the summer when he's driving his car around. It gets so hot. The coyote's diet varies with the seasons in the desert based on the availability of different food resources. So they eat a lot of different foods in this ecosystem, depending on the time of the year. So if I move down here, you're going to see some different animals that live in this desert ecosystem. So we have the Mojave rattlesnakes in the Sonoran Desert. We have these guys, the horned lizard, which we'll learn later it can shoot blood out of their eyeballs. We've got great horned owls nesting in a saguaro cactus. And we have basically, here's a cougar waiting in this Sonora Desert. So it's really unique to try to get to some different ecosystems in your lifetime. Hopefully you get to see maybe who knows, tundra, rainforest, just different ecosystems. It says here, whether in the desert, Arctic, or rainforest, all ecosystems have living and non-living parts. That's what we're going to focus on this week, is living and non-living parts of an ecosystem. And basically, organisms rely on different parts of their environment to provide resources for survival. For example, coyotes in the Sonoran Desert often make their den under rock outcroppings or bushes. Depending on the season, these coyotes may eat cactus fruit, insects, rodents, or even lizards. Keep this example in mind as you answer the why it matters question in the next page. Consider this phenomena and the questions you work through when learning experiences in this unit. So when you're doing the online version, you can enter these in, and in the paper version, you can just kind of jot down your ideas. This is like kind of a thinking like roadmap here. All right. Now I'm going to click here, and we're going to try to scroll down and go on to the next part here. It's going to ask you about these duck populations, and this is a nice interactive part of your virtual book, but we're just going to get through the reading so we can get to the notes. Here's lesson 1 now, parts of an ecosystem, which will show up right here. Now, we take a look at this. Right off the bat, the living and non-living parts of a coral reef provide food and shelter for millions of organisms. Now, think of this ecosystem here. Now, they say coral reefs have some of the most biodiversity of any ecosystem on the planet because there's so many things. It's teeming with life. And if you ever get to swim or scuba dive in a coral reef, it's just amazing. So keep that in mind. And I was able to snorkel and scuba dive a few times, and it was just amazing. The sounds, even under the water, of animals eating things and the clicking, and it's just amazing. So here is basically an example of a very unique ecosystem. Now we're going to basically move into this. Here's another ecosystem. So this is the tundra. It's a layer of subsoil that is permanently frozen. Summers are very short and winters are very cold and windy and long. So this would be like northern Alaska. So the ground, like let's say you dug under this ground 8 inches underneath the ground, it's still going to be frozen. So when they're making this highway to Alaska, the Alaskan Highway, every time they would dig like 5 inches of soil off, the sun would expose that mud, the dirt, and then it would thaw, and then it would turn into mud. And they kept doing this, and it was very challenging, let's say, to build the Alaskan Highway because of permafrost. Now, let's just take a look at that ecosystem. Not a lot of life there, maybe a lot of grasses. You don't have trees there because, well, it's permanently frozen and they can't get their roots through that ice, basically, underground. So analyzing parts of an ecosystem. Starting off here, we have an ecosystem. Is all organisms living together in a particular place along with their non-living environment. Ecosystem contains everything that organisms need to survive. Think about an earthworm living in a yard. The earthworm interacts with other living things when it eats fallen leaves or for food or when a predator captures it. The earthworm also needs air and water, which are non-living parts of this ecosystem. So look at these guys. Okay, so they're getting fed something live. This is biotic, which means it's a living thing, and they're basically eating it. Non-living things would be, we're going to learn momentarily about, are like temperature and basically sunlight. Those are non-living things. So the specific definition of an ecosystem, a community of organisms and their abiotic and non-living environment. Those are separate terms, okay? So we're going to learn about abiotic as well, okay? So just focus on an ecosystem is all the organisms living together in a particular place along with their non-living environment. And I will show like I do, I show the notes at the end so that you can just pause it and take the notes down rather than me pausing and watching me write. So let's just kind of keep moving here. Here is a forest ecosystem. Now, if we take a look, we have a flying squirrel here, and they're really almost misnamed. They should maybe be called gliding squirrels because they mostly glide. They don't really flap around like a bird. Then the book has this fungus here. So we have this shelf fungus for decomposition. We've got this cool looking mole, pretty much blind, eating worms underground. And we've got this salmon. Now we have salmon swimming up the creek right now. They're king salmon here in Port Washington. They don't look like that cool red color. So what it's focusing on is this is an ecosystem. So think of a forest ecosystem. We have desert ecosystem. They just talked about the coral reef ecosystem. So basically, if you're doing the online version, it's nice to drag and drop these things down here. So you would just kind of do this, and you can do this on your own. And since, like you just drag like water to non-living, right? And then drag and drop these, and then you can just check. Now, since we're pressed for time here to get through these so that they're not like super long, I don't want these videos to be 40 minutes long. The living environment. The parts of an ecosystem that are living or that result from activities of living things are called biotic. So think of the word biotic like biology. Bio means living factors. For example, think about a dragonfly that lives in a meadow near a pond. Biotic factors in the dragonfly's ecosystem include the tadpoles, green algae, and insects that the dragonfly eats. Green plants are also biotic factors. Dragonflies lay their eggs on the leaves of plants, and other biotic factors that interact with the dragonfly are the animals that eat dragonflies. So we have the predators of these things, which would be fish, salamanders, frogs, and other insects that compete with the dragonflies for food. A decaying log that dragonflies perch on would also be considered a biotic factor. So even a decaying log can be considered biotic because it's the remains of a living thing. Moving on to something in science, a lot of times all I do is slap an A in front of something and it's the opposite. So in this case, abiotic factors are the non-living. So abiotic is a non-living part of an ecosystem. Some abiotic factors are air, and I'll show you this in my notes, soil, sunlight, water, wind, and temperature. Just think about all the non-living things, and I'll go use an example here in a minute. A dragonfly spends its first part of its life cycle in the water. The water must be a certain temperature for a young dragonfly to survive. The adult dragonfly also needs a certain air temperature to be able to fly. Both young and old dragonflies need oxygen to breathe. Cool thing about dragonflies is they eat mosquitoes when they're in the water, when they're still a larval form. Then they basically hatch, and then they come out as a dragonfly, and they still chase down and eat mosquitoes. So dragonflies are definitely our friends. Now I'm just going to use this as an example and take a look at this ecosystem. Now we have these prairie dogs. They say basically like Texas had about 400 million of these guys. And basically they kind of eradicated them because, well, basically animals would step in these. Like let's say you were a cattle farmer and your cattle were stepping in these, breaking their legs. And they basically poisoned a lot of them, trapped a lot. And like say you're riding through the prairie with a horse, and all of a sudden your horse breaks its leg in their holes. And so there are a number of reasons. Yeah, they were pretty much eradicated, but they're still around. So let's take a look. The abiotic air, that's abiotic, non-living, has to be air. You could assume there's some water there, but the temperature, the sunlight, the living factors, we have quite a few of them. So for example, we've got the monarchs, got the red-winged blackbird, and it looks like there's a bee here. They're obviously living. Plants, grasses, trees in the background. We've got a red-tailed hawk. Those would be all biotic factors. Like biotic means living factors. I'm just going to move on to the notes because you guys have the ability to pause these things. And I will just kind of bring it over here and try to get it so that you can see the notes really well. And then, of course, you could always just pause your computer because that is pretty much the summary and the notes for today. Boom. So that basically concludes this video. I'm trying to keep these shorter and faster because you guys can pause them as you go. All right.
Hi, sixth graders. You just listened to Mr. Cowan read that first section of this lesson, and I, Mrs. Blankenberg, will be reading you through exploration number 2. All right. So far in your notes, you most likely have some words like biotic factors and abiotic factors and ecosystems. Okay, those are your 3 vocab words everyone should have down in their notebook. So if you don't have those, I would rewind this and get those down. Okay, because in this section that we are going to be reading, I'm going to give you a few more words to write down, and my expectation is that you have them in your notes when you come back to class. All right, so I am starting with exploration 2, and it's called describing ecosystem structure. So as a reminder, okay, there's my notes, describing ecosystem structure. I've written the title of the section on my notebook. I've also put Unit 2, Lesson 1 right here, just to remember what in the world I'm doing. And you are going to fill in the date right here as to when you are taking these notes. Okay, I'll give you a second to make sure you all have that down. Okay, let's roll. All right, so this section starts off talking about, well, you guys already talked about biotic and abiotic aspects of an ecosystem. Okay, so this is describing the structure or how it's set up in an ecosystem. Okay, so it says the bodies of individuals, including you, yes, you and your friends, can be described according to different levels of organization, from the smallest living unit, a cell, to a whole organism made up of interacting body systems. Okay, so they have a picture here of a soccer player. She's drinking water. All right. And she is going to put that water into her body, which is then going to move all the way into her cells to replenish them. All right. So it starts here again saying ecosystems can also be described according to their levels of organization. Ecosystems can be organized from the simplest component, an individual organism, to an entire ecosystem. So we're talking about one organism versus a large area, or sometimes small. All right, so in your textbook, either the paper copy that you just got or your online textbook, if you are someone who's going to go in and kind of play around with these little questions that they have in here, this is one of the things that you can click on and get these in the right order. So they're talking about the cell being the smallest, right? Smallest level of organization, and then multiple cells make up a tissue. And then that makes up an organ, and that makes up an organ system. And all the organ systems that we have within our body make up our entire organism. Okay, so if you're going on and doing that, that would be wonderful. All right, are you ready to take some notes? Sure you are. Okay, this next section, levels of organization in ecosystems. Okay, we're going to take a look at a couple different vocab words in here and just a general idea. Get ready to draw some animals and plants and things like that as well. All right, levels of organization and ecosystem. Okay, an ecosystem can be organized into different levels. The smallest level is a single organism. The largest level is an entire ecosystem, all the organisms in an area along with their surrounding. Each level of organization gets more complex as more of the environment is considered. So they give us this example, Florida. Oh, who would like to be in Florida right now? That sounds nice. All right, Florida Evergreens ecosystem. Okay, in the caption, which is always important to read what in the world they're trying to show us, this Florida Everglades ecosystem includes communities of living organisms and non-living factors such as water, soil, rocks, and air. Now, you guys know an even more technical term for non-living. That would be abiotic, right? Biotic meaning living, abiotic non-living. So they look at, as we look at this beautiful ecosystem, right, we can already start thinking about how these organisms all kind of work together. And when we look at, let me just see here. All right, I think they're going to show us. I'm scrolling. Oh, it's looking for something. All right, sorry. Took a minute there, but I found it. All right, so as we scroll through there, this is not the big, this is the gorgeous ecosystem as a whole, okay? But if we take a look at the rest of these vocab words, and then it's going to show us individual sections of that picture in a minute. All right, so we have the word individual, and it's a big subtitle here in our text, which means we should pay attention to it. Okay, and as we read, I can already see there's an orange word here, species, that's a vocab word. We're going to have to write that one down. Okay, so let me read it first, and then we'll read it again to write down our information. Individual. An individual is a single organism, such as one alligator. Each type of organism belongs to a different species. A species includes organisms that are of the same kind and can successfully reproduce, resulting in fertile offspring. All right, I'm going to have to pause here so that I can get that written down. All right, so we have, this is called levels of organization in ecosystems. All right, and we are going to go through each of these vocab words. So for example, an individual, okay, is one single organism. Okay, one single organism. In this case, in the book, they have, this is going to be tricky, people. They have a, oh no, it already looks like a bird. This is supposed to be an alligator. Okay, there we go. All right. I mean, how could you not see that this is an alligator? Okay, so they got one organism, one alligator. I'll label it just in case you don't know that that is an alligator. Okay, and then it gives us this vocab word of a species. Okay, a species includes organisms that are of the same kind and can successfully reproduce, resulting in fertile offspring. So they're giving us that, telling us that each individual would belong to a different species. All right, so a species is when they are the same kind and they can reproduce. Okay. All right, so each of those individuals are from a different species. So you could have one alligator or one bird, okay, and that would be an individual. That is our first level of organization. All right, next, going back to my text. Okay, we have a population. All right, population. Population is a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same place at the same time. Individuals within a population often compete with each other for resources. An example is the alligators in the Everglades ecosystem that compete for food, space, and mates. All right, so I'm going back to my notes so I can write this down, which will require me to read it again. Whenever you're reading nonfiction text, you've got to read it a few times to actually understand it. Okay, so population. Population, a group of individuals. Whoops. Individuals, spell that right, Miss B. Of the same species. That live in the same space. At the same time. Wow, they use that word same quite a bit in here. All right. So population would be, oh goodness, we got to draw lots of alligators now. Are you kidding me? All right, so we have, I'm going to make stick figure alligators with big teeth. All right. I don't know why all my alligators have tails that go up. I'll make this one go down. I don't know why. Okay, here's that guy. See, this is what I mean. I am building a personal relationship with these notes because you know what? They look awesome. All right, so here are a bunch of alligators, okay? A group of alligators. They are the same species. They could reproduce, okay? They are looking for the same food in this area. They are looking for the same places to live, their space, and they're going to compete, okay? This is a population. Okay, so this is our next level. So far we have individual and then population. All right, let's head back to our text. Next we have community. Community is made up of all the populations of different species that live and interact in an area. The species in a community depend on each other for many things, such as shelter and food. For example, animals get energy and nutrients by eating other organisms. Populations in a community compete with other populations for resources. One example is two bird populations with similar nesting habits that may compete for nesting space. Two populations with similar diets may compete for food resources. So this is, I often think about when I'm looking in my yard, right, and I have a bird feeder. Maybe two birds seem to be having a quarrel over who can sit and eat from the bird feeder because they're competing for what food is available. Or you may have noticed that some birds push each other out of their nest, right, because they're competing. I think about the squirrels that we see a lot of, right? Sometimes you can tell that they're kind of chasing each other and fighting for space. So when we think about a community, it is a bunch of different species that live and interact in an area. So let's put that in our notes quick. And we're getting bigger. Okay, community. Made up of all the populations of different species that live and interact in an area. Okay. So when we think about that picture that we started with of the Florida Everglades, this is starting to become all those different animals that live together. Okay, so not only do we have these ferocious looking alligators, I hope your alligators look better. Okay, we also have a flock of birds that might live there. I think they were taller birds standing in the water, right? They're birds with big feathers here. Yep, there we go. Okay. We also may have some trees that are in this area. Okay. And oh, you know what? We got to put some other producers in here. Maybe some weeds that the ferocious animals are hiding behind before they meet their lunch. All right. Okay, so we have all these different species that are living together and interacting with each other. All right, there could be some fish in the pond. Oh, we could just get very creative here. All right, that's a community. And then finally, we get down to ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community of organisms and their non-living environment, abiotic, such as the Everglades ecosystem. Energy flows through the ecosystem, starting with sunlight that powers plant and algae growth. Energy continues to flow through the ecosystem as one organism eats another. That sounds like an energy pyramid, doesn't it? Ecosystems occur at all scales, from a tiny puddle to a vast forest. So at the beginning of this video, I think I mentioned ecosystems can be very tiny on the scale of them or humongous, all right? So let's get this down in our notebook before we look at this last picture to do a quick review. All right, so the last one we got, ecosystem. Okay, ecosystem. A community of organisms and their non-living environment. Okay, so when I think about adding that in, holy cats, I'm going to draw this all again super fast. Super crazy alligator, crocodile. Okay, I forget what it was now. Can't tell from my drawing. We got the birds with that beak, head, beak, wing, 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 wild feet, wild feet, wild feet, wild feet. We got a tree, and we got some bushes or some sort of weed, right? Oh, can't forget the fish in there. Okay, so these were all the living organisms. Oh, I can't see my fish on the screen. That's a shame. All right, so these are all the living organisms, and then we add in the non-living organisms or the non-living aspects of the environment. So, for example, in the water, the fish lives, right? We know water is not living, so we add in the water. We have the air quality, right? Hard to draw air, but I'm going to draw that here. This is the air quality, right? We may have the soil that the plants are living in. Okay. So those would make up an entire ecosystem, the most complete picture. So when I look at your text, again, these are kind of fun to go through. You can go through and click on each of these and it'll say individual. Remember, individual, one species, one individual, one organism. Okay, population, it is a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same place at the same time. See how they're all hanging out here in the same area? Community. This is everything in that area, but I can notice that the water here is kind of shaded out. They don't have that drawn in to try to show that that is not part of a community. Community, think about, in your neighborhood, it's all the people right? All the animals in there. And then an ecosystem would be that the water is now involved, the sky turns a beautiful shade of blue, right? So all the non-living parts are also included with the animals. All right, so that is the levels of organization in an ecosystem. All right, the last thing I just want to quickly show you is they also give a different type of ecosystem, the African savanna. You can tell there are different animals here, but automatically I start to identify, hey, look there's an individual elephant. Oh, and there's another individual giraffe. Okay. Oh, look there's a population. There looks to be like a bunch of giraffes and a bunch of elephants. And it looks like some of these trees are similar as well. Maybe that's a population of trees. The community would be all of these animals living together happily in this savanna. And then finally, the ecosystem would be including this water that looks very important to the animals, and perhaps the air quality, the dirt, the rocks that might be there, right? Those things. Okay, so the last thing in your online textbook and in your paper copy, it looks a little bit different. It's a circle, but some of you might benefit from just seeing this visual. So I'm going to stick it in my notebook too, because, sometimes just being able to picture things in a different way is a great thing to do. All right, so I'm just going to quickly put this in as my last aspect of notes. Okay, and I'm going to actually I like circles, so I'm going to do circles. All right, so we have, first of all, the smallest level of organization is an individual. Okay. I don't know. You can even put your own example in here to make it a little bit more personal. Perhaps let's think, an individual in my yard would be a deer. All right. I don't know about you guys, but we have deer in our yard sometimes. Okay, so 1 deer. All right. Next, a bigger level of organization is a population. All right. This is a bunch of deer. Okay. Then we go from a bigger circle. This is a community. And now I don't only have deer that are in my yard, right? So I have a bunch of deer. I also have rabbits. And I also have 2 children that run around. I'm not going to add them though. Deer, rabbits. I also have birds. Okay. I have a squirrel once in a while. Okay. So this is my community of my yard. And then finally, thinking about an ecosystem would be all of these things plus the water, the soil, okay, the air, all the abiotic factors. So all the abiotic factors are in there. All right, so we have that beautiful diagram. Looks better in your book or in your online book. But that is really all the notes that you need for this section. Okay, so please have those notes ready when you guys come back to class. Hopefully you made them personal. Maybe you made your own diagram like this one, but with animals that you love and are commonly around, or maybe from a favorite ecosystem around the world that you'd like, anything like that. Okay, thanks guys for watching. You're doing great work. You're learning science. Be proud. Bye.